Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Krishna
जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी गोपीजन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी गोपीजन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यमुना तीरावनचारी यमुना तीरावनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी जय कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम जय नित्य गौरंग जय नित्य गौरंग नित्य गौरंग जय नित्य गौरंग जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 4th chapter, text numbers 18 to 20. Since 3 verses are involved, I think we'll try to have just 2 people repeating. Savai manah Krishna padaravindayor Savai manah Krishna padaravindayor Vachamshi Vaikunta Gunanuvarnane वाचांसि वैकुण्ठगुणानुवर्णने करौ हरेर्मन्दिरमार्जनादिषु करौ हरेर्मन्दिरमार्जनादिषु श्रुतिं चकारच्युतसत्कतोदये श्रुतिं चकाराच्युतसत्कतोदये मुकुन्दलिङ्गालय दर्शने दृशौ मुकुन्दलिङ्गालय दर्शने दृशौ तद्भृत्य गात्रस्पर्शेऽङ्गसङ्गमम् तद्भृत्य गात्रस्पर्शेऽङ्गसङ्गमम् घ्राणं च तत्पादसरोजसौरभे घ्राणं च तत्पादसरोजसौरभे श्रीमत्तुलस्य रसनां तदर्पिते श्रीमत्तुलस्य रसनां तदर्पिते पादौ हरे क्षेत्रपदानुसर्पणे पादौ हरे क्षेत्रपदानुसर्पणे शिरो ऋषिकेशपदाभिवन्दने शिरो ऋषिकेशपदाभिवन्दने कामं च दास्येन तु कामकाम्यया कामं च दास्येन तु कामकाम्यया यतोत्तमश्लोकजनाश्रया रतिः यतोत्तमश्लोकजनाश्रया रतिः स वै मनः कृष्णपदारविन्दयोर् वाचांसि वैकुण्ठगुणानुवर्णने करौ हरेर्मन्दिरमार्जनादिषु श्रुतिं चकाराच्युतसुत्कतोदये मुकुन्दलिङ्गालयदेवदेशिनो तद्भृत्य गात्रास्पर्शेऽङ्गसङ्गमम् घ्राणं च तत्पादसरोजसौरभे श्रीमत्तुलस्या रसनां तदर्पिते पादौ हरे क्षेत्रपदानुसर्पणे शिरो ऋषिकेशपदाभिवन्दने कामं च दास्येन तु काम्यकाम्यया यत्तोत्तमश्लोकजनाश्रया रतिः स वै मनः कृष्णपदारविन्दयोर् वाचांसि वैकुण्ठगुणानुवर्णने करौ हरेर्मञ्जिनमार्जनादिषु श्रुतिं चकाराच्युतसत्कतोदये मुकुन्दलिङ्गालय दर्शने दृशौ तद्भृत्य गात्रस्पर्शेऽङ्गसङ्गमम् घ्राणं च तत्पादसरोजसौरभे श्रीमत्तुलस्या रसनां तदर्पिते पादौ हरे क्षेत्रपदानुसर्पणे शिरो ऋषिकेशपदाभिवन्दने Kamam chudase nat kama kamyaya yatottama shloka janashraya ratihi. Word to word translation. Saha, he, Maharaja Ambarisha. Why, indeed. Manaha, his mind. Krishna pada aravindayoho. Fixed upon the two lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Vachamsi, his words. Vaikunta guna anuvarnane. Describing the glories of Krishna. Karau, his two hands. Harehe mandira marjanadishu. In activities like cleansing the temple of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shrutim, his ear. Chakara, engaged. Achyuta, of or about Krishna who never falls down. Sat Katha Udaye, in hearing the transcendental narrations. Mukunda Lingalaya Darshane, in seeing the deity and temples and holy dhamas of Mukunda. Drishau, his two eyes. Tat Bhrutya, of the servants of Krishna. Gatra Sparshe, in touching the bodies. Anga Sangamam, contact of his body. Granam Cha, and his sense of smell. Tat Pada, of his lotus feet. Saroja, of the lotus flower. Saurabhe, in smelling the fragrance. Shrimat Tulasyaha, of the tulasi leaves. Rasanam, his tongue. Tat Arpite, in the prasada offered to the Lord. Padau, his two legs. Harehe, of the personality of Godhead. Kshetra, holy places like the temples of Vrindavana and Dwaraka. Padau Anusarpane, walking to those places. Shiraha, the head. Rishikesha, of Krishna, the master of the senses. Pada Abhivandane, in offering obeisances to the lotus feet. Kamam Cha, and his desires. Dasye, in being engaged as a servant. Na, not. Tu, indeed. Kama Kamyaya, with a desire for sense gratification. Yata, as. Uttama Shloka Jana Ashraya, if one takes shelter of a devotee such as Prahalada. Ratihi, attachment. Translation and purport. By his divine grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Maharaja Ambarisha always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. His words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the Lord's temple, and his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna are about Krishna. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples, and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavana. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulasi offered to the Lord. And he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasada. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaja Ambarisha never desired anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service, in various engagements related to the Lord. This is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 7.1, the Lord recommends Maya asakta manah partha yogam yunjam madashraya. This indicates that one must execute the devotional service under the guidance of a devotee, or directly under the guidance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not possible, however, to train oneself without guidance from the spiritual master. Therefore, according to the instructions of Srila Rupa Goswami, the first business of a devotee is to accept a bona fide spiritual master who can train him to engage his various senses in rendering transcendental service to the Lord. The Lord also says in Bhagavad Gita 7.1, Asamshayam samagramam yata gnasasi tachrunu. In other words, if one wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead in completeness, one must follow the prescriptions given by Krishna by following in the footsteps of Maharaja Ambarisha. It is said, Rushikena Rushikesa Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. Bhakti means to engage the senses in the service of the master of the senses, Krishna, who is called Rishikesha or Achyuta. These words are used in these verses. Achyuta Sat Kathodaye, Rishikesha Padhabhivandane. The words Achyuta and Rishikesha are also used in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is Krishna Katha spoken directly by Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is also Krishna Katha because everything described in the Bhagavatam is in relationship with Krishna. Thus ends the Bhakti Vedanta purport. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yenam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Itinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Navadi Pasyata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaurabhaktaranda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Maharaja Ambarisha always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. His words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the Lord's temple, and his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna are about Krishna. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavan. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulsi offered to the Lord. And he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasada. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord. His head in bowing down before the Lord. And all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaja Ambarisha never desired anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service, in various engagements related to the Lord. This is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. It's a very famous verse describing how Maharaja Ambarisha who was the emperor of the world, how he lived his life, and giving all of us a very practical, very down to earth guidance in how to live spiritual life. And we see here Srila Prabhupada, in the purport to this verse, Prabhupada is stressing to practically actually apply this in your life, you need the guidance of a spiritual master. Right? That is what he's emphasizing in the purport. Saying, yes, this is the way to practically live, but in order to do that, you need the guidance. This indicates that one must execute devotional service under the guidance of a devotee or directly under the guidance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This was the beauty of Srila Prabhupada's greatest contribution to the Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara. He took what was little bit esoteric, more on high-level principles, down to very specific lifestyle and guidance of how to live our lives. And very happily, peacefully, nicely engage what Krishna has given, and a practical demonstration of how in this one life one can go back to Godhead. Prabhupada always used to quote a few examples from the lives of animals to contrast how the very same act, the very same senses in this material world can entangle you and keep you bound in this material world. Right? So, for example, Maharaj Ambarisha engaged his words in describing the glories of the Lord. Right? What animal does Srila Prabhupada usually quote of the wrong way of using your words? Right? The frog, some of you who would have lived in villages or something, or near some water bodies, you would have seen. Right? Have you seen when it rains? That time, whole day and night, wow, 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 wow will be going on. Right? The frog, it's not just for 2 minutes, 1 minute, for hours together. Right? The same, very similar, you also given a mouth, what also is given a frog also is given a mouth. Right? Instead of using the words to describe the glories of the Lord, it's, going on, talking, and what is it doing? What is the effect? Attracts the snake to come and eat it up. Right? This is another example Srila Prabhupada uses. Again about talking. Many examples. Which is the other one that Prabhupada uses a lot? Anybody remembers? In what way? Or just repeat chanting kind of thing. That's another one. Another one is another example of an animal keeps talking, and then question of what exactly are they talking. Prabhupada talks about birds. Huh? Birds, right? Like, you see both in the morning and evening. All of them gather in big numbers. Like a conference is going on. Right? And very systematically they're organized, they're all sitting in this thing. And wow, cow, this is going. So all of them chirping, talking. What happened? What this thing, that thing, I went here, I went there. Big discussion going on. But what is the purpose of the discussion? If the whole focus of the discussion is how to get food, how to do this, how to think, what is the use of that discussion? Right? So, that is why, very practical things, how to use words for describing the glories of the Lord. His hands in cleansing the Lord's temple. Right? His ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna are about Krishna. Right? When you're talking about hearing, again Prabhupada contrasts an animal. Which animal gets this Prabhupada used for hearing? Deer, right? When the hunter is playing his flute, the deer is captivated by it. And it's just like, it's like almost frozen. And makes it very easy for the hunter to catch. Right? Now, again, very simple, very, practical these things. How can you use your ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna? See, the reality is this. We should understand our current situation. Nice philosophy, nice this thing. But how do you practically apply this? This is why the guidance of Guru, the guidance of senior Vaishnavas is needed in life. For example, hearing. Right? See, depending on the modes of nature one is born in and what one has cultivated. When we come to Krishna consciousness, it is not that all of us were born in very pious Vaishnava families. Whole life we've been trained, and suddenly if that is the case, then it's very easy to practice. Right? There are challenges with that approach also. But not everybody takes to it because Atma is to desire. But most of our situations, wherever you're beginning, there is some vasanas you've developed. This body that has been given to you has some prarabdha karma and some attachments, some these things are there. But there are very practical ways, just like hearing. I remember, when I was very young, in my school, college days, it's like all teenagers and all that. I also used to like this Western music, a little bit beats and this and that. Rajoguna, this thing, sure, this thing, dum, you see people going. So, but there are practical ways of engaging dum also in life. And Prabhupada practically engaged that, he used to send from, we talk about from 1960s, 1970s, there is this one very famous, in Poland, there is a very famous gathering of this rock music and all that. I forgot, what is the name of the thing? No, in the Poland there is one big gathering. What is the name? I forgot. Proper time also they used to go. It's a very, very big gathering of all the these things. So devotees used to go even today. From 50 years they've been going. They go to the festival, and they have a big Rath Yatra there. So everybody sets up tents. All these different tents are there. All kinds of crazy music, and people are all drugged and this and that. In that environment, devotees go. And they do nice kirtans, and then they have a Rath. Every day they go on a little parade in the morning and evening. And they distribute prasadam and all that. And some things like that, they are able to, Prabhupada, that practical ways of engaging. Right? Only thing Prabhupada said was, just let them hear Kirtan and let them chant holy name and take Krishna Prasadam, and their life will be liberated. Very simple, practical matters. So one has to understand our own desires and everything, and try to add as much more, because you can't just suddenly go from 0 to 1, right? Or 0 to 100. There are some steps in between. If it means initially you're more attracted to beat music, and there is Hare Krishna music in beat. If you're attracted to very classical music, there is Hare Krishna in classical. If you're attracted to something in between, there is Hare Krishna for everything. Right? So, like that, one has to, all aspects of our lives, how to add more and more and more and more Krishna into our lives. Our process is not a process of, I will stop doing this, I will do this, one day I will become this, then I will practice. That's not a process. Sthane stitau. Doesn't matter whatever status you are in, whatever situation you are in, be in that situation, add Krishna into your life. Maximize the addition of Krishna into your life. 24/7. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna. Very practical. When we decorate the Lord in very beautiful forms and see and admire and do that, our own desires for self-aggrandizement, for self-beautification, all that will be attenuated. Right? And the very same eyes can entangle you, in deep material engagement. Right? Prabhupada gives the example of this Diwali puka. Right? These insects that are during the rainy season of Diwali time, they're born and they're attracted to the lights. They go on hovering over the light, and usually it's like they go into the light and they die. Right? Next day morning you see all of them are lying dead over there. So eyes have a the reality is that when we are born, we have different bodies that are given to us, and that body forces some conditioning on us. Right? These are very practical things. One might say, that how do you get out of this conditioning? Right? Like, see, you're born in a male body, you're attracted to a female. You're born in a female body, you're automatically attracted to a male. That too, whatever species you are in. Right? Maya knows how to trap you. And so one should understand that, this is why a little bit of self-introspection and thinking about this helps. This should be part of our daily regimen of understanding spiritual life. And so, as long as we have these eyes, that attraction will always be there. How do you change that attraction to be attracted to Krishna, Lord's beautiful forms, the beautiful places of pilgrimage, your natural beauty that's created by the Lord? Right? If you're able to, slowly start moving our attachment towards being attached to Krishna. And it's a matter of development. Of some time you'll see, you'll get used to it. Isis engaged duty, not only duty of Krishna, Krishna's temples, Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavana. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. Right? What animal example does Prabhupada give? Who gets caught by sense of touch? Elephant. Right? In what way? Yeah. And that she elephant is trained to touch the male elephant in a particular place, which then is lust is aroused so much. That's such a huge, can you imagine an elephant, how big and strong it is? A huge animal, it is trapped just by the touch of a she elephant, just the touch, nothing else. And it runs behind the she elephant, and the she elephant is trained to just maneuver, and suddenly, because you see, not 1 minute, 2 minutes, it'll just make it run around so that it gets confused. If you just take it like that, any animal will understand there is something fishy over here. But when you are caught in that, see, that's why one should be very careful about not falling trap into this kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. These things, first thing that happens is the intelligence gets bewildered. That is why one is encouraged to have a very regulated life in these matters, right? And Krishna is giving a hint to us, in the Gita. Right? What is the beginning of all of these traps of Maya? Jhayato Vishayan Pumsaha. Right? And we know, we keep hearing, right? This the material world is, this material people also have figured out, right? I keep talking about how marketing, they talk about impression. You pay per impression. What impression are they creating on you? They'll show you, oh, nice here, nice way to enjoy. And once that impression is created, Dhyayato Vishyan Punsa, you'll start thinking, oh, I also can enjoy like this. And the whole life you keep working, you get that, and then you say, what is this? And that is all advertisement. Marketing department of Maya. Everything is nice, but in reality, when you really experience it, all of us would have felt this. Our whole life you're running behind something, and when you get it, such a huge sense of disappointment. What is this what I ran for the whole life? But by the time it is too late, right? It's too late, you're already trapped, and at that point, it's like, okay, next life, something else will trap you. So how do you get out of that, those situations? So we see here Maharaj Ambarisha, who was the emperor of the world, but he is engaging all his senses very, very carefully, practically in things. How we can engage the same touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. We see in our Vaishnava tradition, when you see somebody, this thing, our Vaishnava tradition is to hug, right? Hug devotees. Offer obeisances to them. So these are the ways one can engage practically. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulasi offered to the Lord. He engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasada, which is the animal which gets caught in tongue. Fish, right? Fish example is given. You put the bait on the hook, and it just cannot control itself. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaja Ambarisha never desired anything for his own sense gratification. So this is where, again, very practical guidance is necessary. We have this whole concept of, dovetailing. Dovetailing. Again, a fantastic word that Srila Prabhupada sort of used in a very different way. Because all of us have deep desires within us. How do you dovetail those deep desires in connecting it to Krishna. Right? Initially, when we begin our spiritual life, the connection is very, very, very complicated connection. And our evolution in spiritual life is how we are becoming simple. Right? You'll say, "Oh Krishna, I need to go to your temple. I want to go regularly. See, I don't have a good car. Now, if I had a good Range Rover, then it's got all this advanced technology. It can go in 30-degree incline. It can go, rocks are there, still it can go, this thing, that thing. So if I have a Range Rover, then regular, under all, if it's raining, shining, even when there is a rod of rain, I can just go as if I'm not, in this thing. The reality is, Toyota Corolla also will do the same job. And any of you had to go in cross country to come to any temple. Right? But okay, you have a desire to buy a Range Rover. Initially, you can start with buy a Range Rover, put a Lord's picture over there, and say, I'm using. At least use, if you are forced to fall to into Maya step like that, at least use one day the Range Rover to transport devotees, from some place to some place, or some deities, some this thing like that. Right? Sometimes when we have this Rath Yatra and all that, all these big donors will tell, "Oh, you have a Range Rover, you can bring Nitai Gauranga will go in Range Rover." That Range Rover is somewhat purified. Because that's how our dovetailing begins. Very, very complicated way. You will eat like this, But eventually, we have to come to a point when we are eating like this. Simple. And that simplicity will come through chanting, through devotional service, association of devotees. When you are associating with devotees all the time, somebody will say, Prabhu, Range Rover, too much of insurance, too much of this thing. Do you really? This also is a good one. So hopefully you'll come down to some other level and buy something else. Right? Because otherwise, association is such an important. You keep associating with devotee, with karmis and all those things. Naturally, their talks and these things, that's all will come to us. Right? So, the main important lesson to be learnt over here, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, is that even such a wonderful, such a powerful, king as Maharaj Ambarisha, emperor of the world, he created time for practical engagement in very simple ways. So our desires, our plans, our this thing should be, how in the association of Vaishnavas, in the association of the Lord, and following, we're all lucky to have gotten the shelter of a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, who can, practically guide us in the engagement of devotional service. I'll just end with one very nice verse that some devotee shared recently. I just want to read this. This is from Sri Vrindavana Mahimamrita Sataka by Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakura. He says, when patiently tolerating hundreds of kicks, millions of insults, and the constant onslaught of hunger, thirst, cold, heat, and hundreds of other sufferings, penniless, agitated, shedding showers of tears, and calling out the names of Sri Sri Radha Krishna in a piteous voice, will I wander as a helpless beggar in this land of Vrindavana. You see, an Acharya is talking about how in all these difficulties and these situations, kicks and insults, answer, hunger, thirst, cold, you read all this and say, oh, this is a dangerous philosophy. The reality is, what lifestyle Prabhupada has given us. If you ask anybody who's been practicing for us, sometimes they'll say, oh, it's so easy. Every day you're eating nice prasadam. You're smelling very nice smells, and you're living in a nice clean place, taking nice fresh bath 2 times a day, wearing fresh clothes, having a nice this thing. Very simple ways we've been asked to practice. And even that we are not able to. Right? That's why we should introspect and think, what is it that we should do when why can't we take up? Right? Prabhupada used to say, there's one very famous pastime of what is the difficulty? What is the difficulty? You have tried so many things, millions of lifetimes. This lifetime, just say, okay, I will surrender to Krishna this lifetime. I have surrendered to Maya, I have surrendered to so many things. Right? It's a practical thing. Time is up. I don't know if they're ready for Aarti or not. Okay. Then we'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Bol Premanande.